Despite Richard Schaefer's passionate belief in the fight's monumental potential, not everyone is seeing the same fireworks. In fact, among boxing fans and even some analysts, the response has been noticeably lukewarm. The buzz just isn't there yet. Not the kind of feverish anticipation that had people booking fight parties and clearing calendars months ahead like they did for Mayweather versus Pacquiao. Part of that comes down to perception. Fans are looking at Canelo Alvarez and seeing a fighter who, while still dangerous and incredibly accomplished, seems to have taken his foot off the gas. The excitement that once surrounded his every move has dulled somewhat, largely due to the matchups he's chosen in recent years. Fights against William Skull, Edgar Berlanga, and Jaime Munguia may have padded his record, but they haven't fired up the imagination of the boxing world. People wanted David Benavidez. Instead, they got opponents who, fairly or not, are seen as less threatening and less deserving. That disappointment has trickled into how fans are approaching this fight. There's a lingering sense that Canelo is ducking the most dangerous guy in the division, the one people have been begging to see him face. Instead of embracing a legacy-defining fight with Benavidez, it's like he opted for a safer route, preserving his name and his record more than chasing glory. And that's something fans don't easily forget. When a fighter stops chasing greatness and starts curating a safe career path, the crowd notices. They become less invested. They start to care a little less. And in an era where every fight is fighting for attention, that can be a death sentence for hype. On the other hand, Terence Crawford's situation is a bit more complicated. Pound for pound, he's one of the most gifted boxers alive. But for all that talent, he's never quite captured the imagination of the wider public. It's not that he hasn't had big moments. His win over Errol Spence was impressive, no doubt, but his path has lacked the kind of blockbuster bouts and charismatic rivalries that turn skilled athletes into household names. For someone with his ability, he's strangely untested. That's left a lot of casual fans wondering, just how good is he really? If Crawford had spent the last year bulldozing through top-tier competition at 168, taking out guys like Morrell or Benavidez, he'd be walking into this Canelo fight with a wave of momentum and intrigue behind him. But instead, he stayed. Quiet, largely out of sight, and that's dulled the spotlight on what should be the biggest fight of his career. Then there's the issue of fighting style. Crawford's approach in the ring is brilliant. Technically precise, defensively sound, and deeply strategic. But that style isn't for everyone. He's not the kind of fighter who swings wild and puts himself at risk for the sake of spectacle. He's more like a chess master, setting traps, making subtle adjustments, and slowly dismantling opponents over time. For purists, that's a joy to watch. For the average viewer who tunes in for fireworks and knockouts, it can feel like watching someone read a textbook. That's part of the challenge when trying to market this fight as an all-time great event. If people think they're signing up for a tactical battle instead of an all-out war, they might hesitate to buy in. And that's not a knock on Crawford. It's just a reality of how modern fight fans consume entertainment. Even with all those challenges, Richard Schaefer remains convinced this fight has something special. He believes that once the storylines are laid out, two generational talents, two vastly different legacies, two styles that contrast perfectly, fans will come around. He's putting his faith not just in the fighters themselves, but in the narrative. Schaefer's vision is clear. This is more than just a boxing match. It's a crossroads moment for the sport. On one side, you have Canelo Alvarez, the face of boxing for the past decade, now at a point where every fight could be his last big one. On the other side is Crawford, the brilliant technician, finally stepping into a spotlight worthy of his skills, trying to carve out a legacy that has so far eluded him in the eyes of the mainstream. Schaefer sees this as the perfect storm. All it needs is the right push and the right presentation to capture the imagination of the world. But while Schaefer and the promoters are pouring their energy into selling that vision, the public still needs convincing. Marketing dollars and highlight reels can only go so far. What people are really waiting for is a reason to believe this fight matters. Not just because two belts are on the line or because the fighters are ranked highly, but because it feels like something bigger. A turning point, a moment where legends are made and questions finally get answered. Can Canelo still dominate at the highest level, or has his time passed? Is Crawford truly one of the greats, or has he benefited from careful matchmaking and underwhelming competition? These are the kinds of questions that sell fights, not taglines or posters. And until the promotion leans into that emotional core, the numbers might not live up to the lofty expectations being set. As anticipation builds, slowly but surely, there's another layer to this whole promotion that's worth paying attention to: the involvement of Turki Al-Sheikh. The Saudi entertainment chief has been shaking up the boxing world, putting serious financial muscle behind major fights, and pushing to make Saudi Arabia the new capital for mega events. His fingerprints are all over this one, and that means the spectacle is going to be next level. We're talking lights, glitz, and luxury. An environment designed to scream, biggest fight of the year. But even with a venue fit for kings and a production budget that rivals the Super Bowl, the truth is, fans don't just buy tickets and pay-per-views for a fancy setting. They buy into drama, into real stakes, into fighters who look like they'd fight in a parking lot if they had to. And so far, the emotional investment just isn't quite there for the masses. And let's not forget, while both Canelo and Crawford are legends in their own right, they're entering this matchup from two very different places in their careers. Canelo, with all his accolades, is starting to feel the weight of time. He's no longer the 20-something phenom with lightning in his fists and something to prove. He's now the veteran, the name on the marquee, the prize everyone wants. But with that status comes risk. Every fight he takes now shapes how we remember his legacy. Will he go out like a warrior, taking on the toughest challengers until the wheels fall off? Or will people look back and see a man who played it safe when it mattered most? The Crawford fight could answer that. But only if Canelo shows up with fire in his eyes and a chip on his shoulder, not just a polished PR team and a payday waiting. Crawford, meanwhile, has always been a bit of a mystery. He's never courted the spotlight like other stars in the sport. He doesn't trash talk much. He doesn't post flashy clips on social media every day. He just fights, efficiently, brilliantly, and often without much noise. For hardcore boxing fans, that's admirable. But for the wider public, it can come off as distant, hard to connect with. This fight with Canelo is his shot to change that. It's his chance to show people not just how good he is, but why they should care. Why his journey, his discipline, and his desire to be great matter. And if he can rise to the occasion, not just in the ring but in the build-up, he could walk away, not just with a win, but with a level of fame and respect that's eluded him up to now. Of course, one big question looms over everything. What happens after this fight? Because whether it's a classic or a dud, the result will send ripples through the sport. If Canelo wins convincingly, he cements himself as still being the man to beat, older, wiser, and still elite. If Crawford pulls it off, the conversation about his legacy changes overnight. He becomes not just a great fighter, but a generational one. Someone who dared to step into a new weight class, face a bigger, more experienced opponent, and came out on top. That kind of win doesn't just earn belts. It earns immortality in boxing history. But if the fight is underwhelming, or if it's seen as a mismatch, both men could walk away with their reputations a little bruised. That's the fine line they're walking here. It's not just about winning, it's about how they win, and what it means when the dust settles. At the end of the day, this fight still has time to build steam. Storylines can shift, press conferences can ignite rivalries, training clips can go viral. All it takes is the right moment, one quote, one face-off, one spark, to turn a quiet build-up into a firestorm. But that moment hasn't come yet, and until it does, the promoters, the